Hello everyone and welcome back to Commonwealth Run. Today we will look closer at one of Breath of the Wild's biggest secrets, and a pattern that has been heavily overlooked following the reveal of Breath of the Wild's sequel, namely the long real-life Zelda timeline of series producer Eiji Aonuma and director Hidemaru Fujibayashi, and the importance of Skyward Sword to the development of Breath of the Wild and its sequel. Get ready to be mind-blown in the course of the next 10 minutes or so, but first we would greatly appreciate if you could leave a like, subscribe and press that shiny notification bell for all notifications. Less than 9,000 subscribers to go to 250,000. As we all know, Skyward Sword initiated the beginning of the Zelda Chronicle, but what is less known is that it also likely marked for the foundation of its end.
Open your eyes.
You see, prior to Skyward Sword, the Zelda team at Nintendo had been moving further and further down the chronicle from Ocarina of Time with its biggest games. That is to say, after Ocarina of Time in 1998 created two timeline branches to follow. One where the hero of time was once again a child and about to depart Hyrule and then ended up in the nightmarish Termina, and the other timeline branch which the adult hero had been sent out of and his absence resulted in the sealing of Hyrule and then flooding under the Great Sea. Both Majora's Mask and the Wind Waker were connected to Ocarina of Time, but from different perspectives or timeline branches. From this point on, the legacy of the hero of time had two main game paths, child and adult timeline branches. At the time of Ocarina of Time's launch in 1998, Capcom had just signed a deal to work on a number of smaller handheld Zelda titles, which would eventually turn out to connect everything thanks to one man, Hidemaru Fujibayashi. Under his direction and writing of the story for the Oracle games, Four Swords and finally the Minish Cap, he brought his Zelda games in a completely different direction than the Miyamoto and Aonuma Hero of Time legacy games. The Nintendo Zelda team was simply moving down a branch but at the same time linear path further and further away in time from the magnum opus Ocarina of Time. Hidemaru Fujibayashi as a Capcom talent distanced himself from these types of linear restrictions, and for his writing jumped back and forth in the Zelda chronology and wasn't even afraid to challenge Zelda's origin story to that point, Ocarina of Time. You see, the Oracle games were set after A Link to the Past, Four Swords in an unspecified point in time with a brand new villain, Vaati, which was then confirmed to take place prior to Ocarina of Time in 2004's The Minish Cap, as this game told Link's hat and also Vaati's origin story. Hence, Fujibayashi with complete liberty placed two of his Zelda games prior to Ocarina of Time in the Zelda chronology. Soon though, the two different visions would collide as Capcom's contract with Nintendo expired after the conclusion of the Minish Cap. Most of the other Capcom members returned back to Capcom, but the story genius Fujibayashi was brought over to the Nintendo Zelda team. And they needed him, as following the backlash of the Wind Waker, they had been forced to create a darker home console Zelda game, Twilight Princess, but at the same time wanted to continue alongside the story set in the Wind Waker on the Nintendo DS. Aonuma, who had since Majora's Mask continued Miyamoto's vision of gameplay first and story to fit this one, worked during the development of Phantom Hourglass with Fujibayashi, who put equal importance on story and gameplay. After the conclusion of the development of that game, Eiji Aonuma was faced with what to do with Fujibayashi. Should he continue the story of Link and Tetra's descendant in Spirit Track's New Hyrule, or should he put him on a more important project? Aonuma made a decision to promote Fujibayashi and promoted him to direct the next console Zelda game to a 25th anniversary Zelda title instead of Spirit Tracks. Why? As the 25th anniversary Zelda title was to be an origin story to Link, the Master Sword, and the use of the Triforce. And who better to write and direct it than the man who had been writing Zelda stories for the last decade? Fujibayashi had with the Capcom Zelda team added sense and depth to the story and chronology of Zelda, and Skyward Sword became one of the most linear Zelda games because it had to. Why? To allow Hidemaru Fujibayashi to tell the best and most detailed plot in the series, obviously, which introduced brand new lore such as Goddess Hylia and her battle with Demise, the forging of the Master Sword and the Spirit Fire within the blade, all the Zeldas being the bloodline descendants of the mortal reincarnation of Hylia, all the Links being the spirits of the original hero, and Demise's curse aka the hatred of his incarnation in Ganondorf Ganon, and also expanding on Sheikah and divine lore with the timeshift stones and technology, the gates of time and so on. Skyward Sword added so much new lore that it in many ways outweighed the established Zelda canon in one single game. But here's the kicker. By giving Fujibayashi, the master of Zelda storytelling and fixer of timelines, free reign, Aonuma had also caused the need to return to the lore established in Skyward Sword at some point in the future. But where would they fit all of it when nothing brought up in Skyward Sword has been explored in previous Zelda games, at the very end of the timeline obviously, after all the other timeline branches end? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we have an official Zelda timeline, which has to end at some point. Also, this is how Breath of the Wild was shaped over the course of close to 2 decades. The whole idea of the Sheikah being these incredible technological gurus appears to be Fujibayashi's idea, as he massively expanded how the Zelda universe and time travel with this one function with the introduction of timeshift stones. Or more precisely, adapted the timeshift stones and the color to that of a different time-bending item, the Ocarina of Time. Hence, Hyrule Historia writes that the Ocarina of Time is made out of timeshift stones, another example of Fujibayashi's ability to take something pre-existing and adding an origin point to said detail. In the Minish Cap, it was Link's hat and the royal family. In Skyward Sword, it was Goddess Hylia, the forging of the Master Sword, the first use of the Triforce, the hatred of Demise, the blood of the goddess, and the spirit of the hero. What we see is that the Zelda team, beginning from Skyward Sword, learned from Fujibayashi to not be afraid of challenging established 3D Zelda conventions. In Skyward Sword, this was attached to re-establishing and solidifying much of the Zelda lore, which Fujibayashi, as writer and director, was personally responsible for, in particular when it came to the origin story of the entire series. However, the heavy emphasis on story came at the expense of freedom in gameplay, which remained the same and received criticism for being too linear, repetitive, and tedious in its level design. It also didn't help that many struggle with the motion controls that the entire game was built around. Hence, for Breath of the Wild, Aonuma and Fujibayashi must have decided that it was enough to bring over the established lore from Skyward Sword and previous titles and rather focus on the game world and gameplay within this one. This call may not have been entirely based on the Zelda team alone, but rather that in 2011 along Skyward Sword a certain game called Skyrim came out and changed everything for the adventure game genre, mostly thanks to its boundless open world with a large variety of weaponry, upgrades and so much more. A world players could explore for hundreds of hours and still have more to explore. Which brings us to an important point to bring across, namely that Skyward Sword altered and enriched the lore of Zelda, while Skyrim changed Zelda's world design and gameplay. Breath of the Wild is all about exploration of a post-apocalyptic world following a great calamity 100 years prior, and to bring this non-linear vision into reality, linear storytelling was sacrificed. Hence, the story was handed over to Akihito Toda, while Hidemaru Fujibayashi would challenge the conventions of Zelda's gameplay as purely a director while also reminding of Skyward Sword's accomplishments. The Zelda team surpassed Skyrim with flying colors both when it came to its game world and the gameplay department, and that was enough for some, but probably not for Toda and Fujibayashi. Since there's something different about this Hyrule that merges everything from past games together in a way that with a logical approach to time shouldn't work. A convergence of sort, which might as well have been taken as part of the development process from Skyrim, or more precisely, the depths of Elder Scrolls lore. Namely the concept of on-time that disappeared following the end of a Dragon Break. The Dragon Break itself is a very complex phenomenon that we don't have time to go in depth into. What we need to understand, however, is what happens with split or branch timelines at the end of each of these. Since the Elder Scrolls wiki puts it this way, quote, "At the end of a Dragon Break, the timeline reconnects, making all possibilities and outcomes truth, though contradictory to each other," end quote. Sounds quite familiar to the contradictions found in Breath of the Wild, which kind of connects events and personalities and locations from the child, adult and downfall timeline branches. It is also surprisingly in line with breaking established Zelda conventions, something which Fujibayashi has been known for ever since his Capcom days, when he was bold enough to create Zelda origin stories set prior to Ocarina of Time and Ganondorf's rise to power. This man, unlike Aonuma, has never felt himself bound by Miyamoto's Zelda legacy and teachings, as he never worked under him. Instead, he was embraced and motivated by Aonuma from day one to reinvent Zelda as one of the younger guard. And that is exactly what Fujibayashi did as a writer and director of Skyward Sword and then director of Breath of the Wild in regards to story and gameplay. In other words, Breath of the Wild was left deliberately incomplete to challenge Zelda's gameplay, and now that both story, game world and gameplay conventions have been challenged and changed to the unrecognizable by Fujibayashi, it's time to combine all three. Which brings us to Breath of the Wild sequel, which is likely to deliver on everything Fujibayashi has been building up for well over a decade. No more compromises on story or gameplay, but delivering what the series has never got. A proper conclusion. Remember, director Hidemaru Fujibayashi is a rebel who was not afraid to direct and write the story of Skyward Sword, the very first quest in the Zelda chronology. With it, he also created the foundation for a timeline that he with help from Aonuma and few others in the Zelda team put together and that he feels ownership to. Hence, we shouldn't be surprised that this rule breaker and innovator created Breath of the Wild in order to bring things back to its origin point, to offer a climax like no other has delivered before. one that may involve time travel between timeline branches, and a final battle that will end it all in a way that only Fujibayashi can deliver, creating a magnum opus that will define his and Eiji Aonuma's entire career. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the big secret of Breath of the Wild. A hungry rebel who in his entire Zelda career has challenged established conventions to deliver something grander, exactly what Zelda, the most respected franchise in gaming, deserves. In this regard, we should see Breath of the Wild as just the introduction to its sequel, the most ambitious Zelda story and game that will be the crowning achievement and the possible end of a long-lasting timeline. But what do you think? Is Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild director Hidemaru Fujibayashi the genius and rebel we outline him to be? Or will he really make Breath of the Wild sequel the defining moment of Zelda that we've been waiting for through 20 games, or if the game comes out in 2021, 35 years? Sound off in the comment section down below. And as always, be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe, press that shiny notification bell and for all notifications, as we want you to hop on and bring us all to 250,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Less than 9,000 left to go. Finally, a big thanks to all our patreon.com/commonrealm supporters, which we hope you consider joining or by pressing the join button here on YouTube. Until the next video, this was Conrad of the Commonwealth Realm, and please enjoy one of these two awesome videos.